President, the clock continues to tick away while we wait for the dissent from the summit, when the President and Speaker Boehner walk out with tablets in hand saying, "We have a deal." Many of us beginning to wonder if that's going to be achievable. We're holding our breath, but as we near the end of the year, clearly, as has been stated repeatedly on the floor, the necessity of putting something together to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff, the disastrous consequences of our not acting. Tax increases for every American taxpayer. Massive cuts to defense at a time when the threats around the world are as varied and as great as we've seen in a long time. Other essential programs of the federal government being affected by that. That's the last thing we need in this tepid economy, with a lot of people out of work and hoping for some consensus to come together to provide a long-term solution to our fiscal problem that continues to have a negative effect on our economy and, more importantly, keeps people out of work. And so as that clock ticks, some are saying, well, partisanship is just too great in Washington. The country's too divided. We're not going to be able to reach a consensus here in terms of how to address this problem. I disagree with that. Over the last 2 years and more, we have had a number of proposals brought forward on a bipartisan basis. It started with Simpson Bowles, the former chief of staff to President Clinton, and Al Simpson, a member of this body for a long time, recognized as two individuals that could take a look at the situation that we're in and make a proposal. That's been running two and some years running now. That was presented, President's own commission, yet that was rejected by the President. And then there, of course, was the Gang of Six, later the Gang of Eight, which met on a bipartisan basis for a number of months, both sides contributing to an attempted package to put together to submit to the Congress and to the White House. That was a bipartisan effort. The gang of the super committee of 12, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. They were unfortunately unable to come to an agreement. That has brought us to this particular point in time because the failure of our effort to do this ended up in a procedure which drives us here to the end of the year and toward this so-called cliff. I've been talking to a number of my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats and others. There is a majority consensus here for putting together a credible long-term package to deal with our fiscal situation, which would send a message to the world and send a message to our citizens that the Congress and the government are serious about addressing our fiscal situation and putting us on a path to fiscal health. And in doing so, it would restore the confidence of the American people. It would restore the confidence of investors around the world that America is getting its act together at a time when Europe is struggling, at a time when Japan is struggling and slowing down, when China growth is slowing. The world is looking to the United States to take the lead, as it has in so many times and so many crises before. But yet all they see is the standoff and the inability to do what I think we all need to do. Now, the choice is very clear. We have come to the point where I think most people looking at this understand that if we don't act now, the so-called kicking the can down the road no longer is a viable opportunity. It no longer is something that we can afford to do. There's a group called Kick It Back, and I can see why the American people are frustrated over our inability to come to some agreement on this. And so obviously we hope that the President and Speaker Boehner will bring us that grand bargain by which we can evaluate and address before the end of the year. Now, I have frequently said from this podium and back to the people that I represent in Indiana that if we don't start with addressing the spending problem, it doesn't matter how much we raise in taxes or revenue, it doesn't matter how much else we do to address our problem, if we don't address the out-of-control federal spending, we can't get from here to there. We can't put forward a credible package. It is no secret that over the years, without laying the blame on one party or another, our spending has exceeded our revenues now to the extent that we are plunging into serious debt and serious deficit. Over $1 trillion a year accumulated over just the last 4 years, and a significant amount of money before that. It is unsustainable. Whether you're a liberal economist or a conservative economist, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, or libertarian, just do the math, and it's simple math. It's not calculus, it's third grade math. You cannot keep spending more than $1 trillion a year, go and borrow that debt to cover the difference, and without it having severe consequences. And the consequences we've had is a very slow recovery from a very deep recession that has stifled job growth, stifled innovation, kept people out of work. The latest statistics are that over 23 million Americans are either unemployed, underemployed, or have simply given up looking for a job. Just frustrated with their inability to find any work whatsoever. And a staggering percentage of those unemployed are young people, people under 30. Robert Samuelson wrote an article a couple of days ago stating, "Is this the lost generation?" Basically saying that those in the under 30 category we may lose a whole generation of those who will not have the opportunity to gain meaningful employment, to realize their dreams, to participate in the American dream, of getting a good job, of marrying and having a family, of buying a house, paying the mortgage, doing the things which our generation has enjoyed. We've been given that opportunity, but a generation behind us is being denied that opportunity. And will it be the lost generation? The answer to that question falls on the shoulders of those of us here, not only at the White House with the President and his advisors, but with the Congress, the Senate, and the House. And we now have the opportunity, maybe a historic opportunity, I do believe it's a historic opportunity, to right the wrongs and to put in place something that, yes, will have an impact. Yes, it's medicine that we have to take for our excessive spending, but it'll bring about the cure. And how many of us are thinking about the future for our children, our grandchildren, the nation's children, the nation's grandchildren? How many of us can stand here and simply say, well, we're doing okay at our level, our generation, but we're not willing to make any sacrifice whatsoever to ensure that this country can provide for future generations? Most agree that if we don't have a package that has $4 to $4.5 trillion of spending reduction over the next 10 years, it will not be a credible package. And there's also now almost universal agreement that unless we incorporate entitlement reform, or the mandatory spending that has to take place over which we have no control because of the laws we've put in place basically say these go on automatically, now eating up 64% of our budget and denying those who come to us about improving our roads, providing medical research, supporting education, whatever your interest, those interests are receiving less support than they have before, and they will continue to receive less support to the point where they may receive no support, because the mandatory is projected with the baby boom retirement of accelerating to points which our country simply cannot afford. It'll drive us into bankruptcy. And so if the package that is brought down, hopefully from the White House, or if we do not address in this body the spending issue that incorporates the restructuring for the preservation of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, but also with the realization that unless we do something, those programs are going to go bankrupt, have severe impacts on those who are currently receiving those benefits. Unless we do that, we will not have a credible package. Now, Senator Wyden and I have proposed comprehensive tax reform as something that needs to be done. Regulatory reform has been suggested by others, which I support. But if we don't acknowledge that the final package presented to us incorporates those long-term solutions, we will simply be back here in the next debt limit crisis. We'll be back here in the next fiscal crisis. We will continue to see our country languish in terms of providing growth and job opportunities for our people. And we will not have addressed the problem and kicked the can down the road one more time, I think, to the disgust and displeasure of the American people. They're cynical enough about our ability to do something as we speak, let alone what might happen if we can't come to an agreement that everybody knows we need to come to. Mr. President, when I decided to run again in 2010, after being out of the Senate for more than a decade, I didn't do it just to regain the title of senator. I didn't put retirement on hold and more time with my family aside because I thought it would be fun to be back here. I did it because I want to be able to leave a stronger country for my children and grandchildren and for others' children and grandchildren. I did it because I want to restore this country so that America's future generations can enjoy the kind of life full of promise and opportunity that our generation has been able to enjoy. I look back over the history of our country and see the sacrifice being made from the Revolutionary War all the way through the 2+ centuries. The world wars, the fiscal crises, the depression, the sacrifices that have been made by former generations so that future generations can enjoy the promise of America, unique of any country in the world in terms of providing opportunities for individuals and their families. All of us have experienced that moment when back home, when a man or woman looks you in the eye and tells you they're putting their trust in you to do the right thing when you get back to Washington. They're putting their trust and faith in us to make sound decisions, that the votes that we take on the Senate floor will strengthen our economy so that they can make their mortgage payments and get a job and send their kids to college and enjoy the opportunities and benefits that have been so beneficial to so many of us. This is a great challenge. It's a historic moment. It's an opportunity to transcend politics, to rise above the petty partisan divisions and say, let's join together and do what is right for the future of this country. Can't do this without the presidential leadership. The president seems to have an obsession with raising taxes. We haven't heard much from the White House in terms of addressing the spending issues, the issues that are driving our deficit forward, the issues that are, unless addressed, will not result in a credible solution to our problem. And so we're asking you, Mr. President, we're asking you to join with us in making the tough decisions to do what I think we all know needs to be done, to not push this into the future anymore, to not keep people out of work, to not keep that 23 million still looking for jobs, to address the plight of the 41% of the 23 million people either unemployed, underemployed, or simply who have given up, to give them hope for the future, to give them some light at the end of the tunnel. So we're asking you to join us, and we're asking you to do a grand bargain, to talk more than just about taxes increases, which we know can impact our job opportunities and our economy. Republicans have put forth ideas in terms of the revenue portion of that without raising rates and destroying the opportunities for the nearly 1 million sole-owned property businesses and others who don't fall in the corporate category. But it's pointless. As David Brooks said in the New York Times in a recent piece, it is, and I quote, "It's pointless to cut a short-term deal if entitlement programs are still structured to bankrupt our children." Republicans and Democrats could make 2013 the year of the truly grand solution. So that's what we're imploring you, Mr. President. That's what we're asking all of our colleagues to consider. Take this historic opportunity. This is going to be our legacy. It's not a vote that we made in the past. It might not be a vote we make in the future. We will be judged at what we did at the time when the clock has run out, when the absolute necessity for a package grand enough to achieve credibility, enforceability going forward, and to restore the confidence of the American people and the investment community to lead the world to recovery. This is our chance, Mr. President, and I hope we take that chance. With that, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate, having received the papers from the House with respect to H.R. 4310, passage of the measure as amended is vitiated. The adoption of the Senate amendment is vitiated.